It's time. To take the Nimbus. To Mayhem 10.
Indeed. That was a direct port of the old Nimbus build from Mayhem 4 to Mayhem 10 with a Mayhem 10 ion cannon. Is it possible to make the Nimbus viable in Mayhem 10? Can we do better on our old punching bag Captain Trot? Or is this just a troll video? I think we can make a strong Nimbus build in the highest difficulty if we approach the problem a little bit differently. Let's roll a real intro. Back in the Mayhem 4 days, Moxie came out with a Nimbus build that is probably my favorite build of his ever. It had an unconventional playstyle, but it steamrolled mobs and a lot of bosses. It was my go-to farming build, and I had people ask about it when I joined multiplayer lobbies. For those of you that don't know, the Nimbus class mod creates a damaging cloud whenever an enemy is first damaged by Amara's action skill. That cloud's damage is based off of the dot damage of the gun you're holding. And if you have an anointment that buffs gun damage, the cloud would factor that in. If your gun doesn't have a dot, then it is based off of the regular card damage. So if you held an ion cannon, for example, few things stood a chance against the cloud. And you could use bonus elements on action skill and anointments to add extra elements and double or even triple the damage of the cloud. It was glorious. However, in Mayhem 10, enemy health outscales gun damage by a factor of nearly 5 to 1. Relative to the old Mayhem 4. How can we make a strong Nimbus build if we're only working with 20% of the damage it used to do? Well, a lot has been added to the game since January, and we can take advantage of some of it. We're also shifting our mindset away from a quote Nimbus build per se and toward a general damage over time build. You can see from this gameplay that this build plays quite a bit differently from the old Nimbus build. You use ties that bind for one. Previously, phase cast was the skill of choice because a 250 phase cast anointment would buff our gun's damage, thus buffing our Nimbus cloud damage. The only anointment ties that bind had going for it was 100 ASE. That's no longer true. Back then we didn't have the 200 ASA anointment, which works while enemies are grasped. We also didn't really understand how the consecutive hits anointment works, which quickly ramps up to give us 200% gun damage regardless of what action skill we're using, regardless of whether an enemy is grasped or not. And we also didn't have the 50-150 radiation damage anointment, which adds 150 radiation damage to all attacks, and gives us yet another dot for our cloud, giving us a total of 4 dots for our Nimbus. You can see in these clips that I'm using the front loader shield, so this is the anointment of choice. Second, I'm definitely not holding an ion cannon here. This is the Nukem. Wait, Stone, you say, doesn't the lower damage of the Nukem compared to the ion cannon reduce our Nimbus cloud damage? It sure does, but using the Nukem has a few advantages that make up for it. For one, our mobility while holding the Nukem isn't reduced, so we can dodge attacks and get out of danger more effectively. For two, we can use the Nukem as an offensive weapon and actually add to our dot damage. Yes, the Nukem is non-elemental, but with our URAD anointment and our bonus elements, we can proc some pretty strong dots from a Nukem rocket. Here's an example of the Nukem proccing 3 dots on this enemy's armor bar. It's hard to see the numbers, but this is 272,000 radiation, 131,000 shock, and 317,000 corrosive. That's 720,000 damage per tick, or over 2 million damage per second. This is a dot that we can stack on top of the Nimbus cloud dots. The ion cannon can proc stronger dots, of course, but it fires slower, reloads slower, and consumes 6 times the ammo. The Nukem can also splash elements in a very large radius, potentially proccing dots on a large amount of enemies at once. Not to mention, the Nukem can be a pretty strong weapon on its own, especially if we get Overkill and Remnant working for us. Third, we're using a special grenade to add to our dot damage, Doc Hina's Miracle Bomb. This grenade creates damaging lava pools on the ground, and any enemies above those pools take a lot of damage. On flesh enemies, it can get up to over 400,000 damage per tick. The lava pool is a special effect of the grenade, so bonus elemental damage doesn't add much to it, but our URAD anointment adds damage to all attacks, so we can get another 400,000 radiation damage per tick, giving us 2.5 million damage per second. By the way, this is before the recent grenade buff. It's even larger now. This grenade is perfect for taking out enemies too close for the Nukem and when we don't have our grasp available. As you can see, between all 3 of our attacks, the Cloud, the Nukem, and the Miracle Bomb, we can get some serious damage over time. Let's continue going through our gear. We use the front loader as mentioned, with a bonus element. You might think we could go down quickly without health gauge and without direct lifesteal, but we're actually quite hard to take out. Our playstyle is to dodge attacks and stay away from enemies, and we will have some damage reduction and sustain. More on that later. Let me go over the theory for our bonus elements. There are 4 elements that have damage over time: fire, shock, corrosive, and radiation. Cryo is not advised for this build. We will have radiation damage added to everything from our URAD anointment. The other 3 are split between Amara's action skill element, and thus the primary element of her Nimbus cloud, and our 2 bonus elements on our front loader and our Miracle Bomb. As far as the Nimbus cloud is concerned, it does not matter whether we have, say, fire as Amara's action skill element, or fire as a bonus element instead. The cloud will do the same amount of fire damage in either instance, and the damage won't stack if we have fire on both. The only difference in having an element as Amara's attunement versus a bonus element is that we only get Nukem dots from bonus elements. So if I have fire as my action skill element, the Nukem will only proc radiation, shock, and corrosive dots. And that's how I prefer to have my elements set up: shock and corrosive ASCs between my Miracle Bomb and front loader. Now, this means that although my Nukem won't proc fire dots, ties that binds shared damage will be fire damage. You might think this is an unwise setup for situations like Wotan or during the Guardian takedown, but I actually don't change my element setup at all. Ties that bind shares so much damage that even if it's fire against armor, it's still fine. I prefer to be able to proc shock and corrosive dots with my Nukem in these situations, where we need to constantly be attacking and doing damage. Looking at our artifact, this is also something we didn't have back in January. Pearl of Ineffable Knowledge boosts gun damage, and the Nimbus Cloud accounts for that. It of course also boosts our Nukem damage directly. And of course there's the Nimbus class mod itself. Points into Tempest are the best, but points into Violent Tapestry are also helpful for actually proccing our dots. The Nimbus Cloud doesn't have a guaranteed proc for the cloud damage. Often it takes a second for the heavy damage to start. Violent Tapestry speeds up that process. Conflux points do not benefit us at all. Action skill cooldown rate is highly recommended as a passive. What's really fun about this build is that we have attacks for every range of enemy. The Nimbus Cloud from our grasp is medium to very long range. The Nukem is for medium to long range. The Miracle Bomb is for short to medium range. And for enemies up in our face, we punch them. With Groundbreaker, we are constantly getting tons of damage added to our next melee. If you've got your dots going, any enemy stupid enough to get close to us is often one-shot with a punch. This is also a good mechanic for getting up from fight for your life. Your dots will continue to stack while you're down, so if you can punch anyone nearby, you'll probably get a second wind. You can also carry a URAD face puncher, or just fire some Nukem rounds. So here's our skill trees. Let me explain how this build works with ties that bind and sustainment. It's not straightforward. Our Nimbus Cloud damage does not get transferred through ties that bind. It also does not heal us through sustainment. Here's a list of the various things that happen through these skills. Nimbus Cloud damage that procs on a linked enemy gets transferred back to the grasped enemy, and this heals us. Catharsis explosions that hit a linked enemy transfer the damage and heal us. Catharsis sends the last stick of damage that killed an enemy into the explosion, so that can be anywhere from 100 to 500,000 damage. It also explodes once per element, affecting the enemy that dies in quick succession. We can get up to 4 quick explosions every time Catharsis procs. Radiation explosions also can get sent around the ties that bind linkage and heal us. Remnant creates its usual mayhem, taking out groups of enemies and healing us. And lastly, this is unimportant but it's very interesting, barrel explosions heal us, as long as they don't hit us. Outside of these interactions, Wildfire directly transfers individual dots and can double or triple the amount of damage an individual enemy takes. If you add all this together, sometimes you get a very similar effect to the well-known Ties That Bind plus Revelation build, where you grasp a group and everyone immediately explodes. Lure being our augment helps us blend everything together and pass the damage around. Now to go over the other skills, maxing out Anima and Tempest is an obvious choice for increased dot length and dot strength. Dread increases gun damage when an enemy is grasped, which means it's increasing our Nimbus Cloud damage. Indiscriminate is really cool with a Nukem. You'll often get an extra 1 or 2 Nukem explosions out of a single shot because Indiscriminate procced. You don't even need to hit an enemy directly with your RPG. If an enemy got hit by the splash, there's a chance for Indiscriminate to create a new projectile. In the blue tree, a maxed Violent Tapestry is a must, and we put 4 points into Do Harm to increase Ties That Bind's shared damage, 5 into Restless for a faster cooldown, 1 into Ascendant to increase the radius of a lure and pull more enemies into our Maelstrom of Death, Blade Bearer for any enemy unlucky or lucky enough to survive Ties That Bind. Wrath increases gun damage, which again increases our Nimbus Cloud damage. Remnant is self-explanatory and a must-have. Maxed Awakening for better Violent Tapestry and Do Harm effectiveness. And of course, Avatar for double action skill usage. It's prudent, by the way, to fake grasp before we real grasp to make sure our bonus elements are activated. We've got 11 points left, and we need these to help us become more tanky, since we do not have a health gate. So we invest these in the green tree. Max Clarity and Helping Hands is the best combo I've found. Then I put 1 point into Mindfulness to shorten our shield regeneration delay. I would put more points into this if I could. When we get another level cap increase, I would max out Mindfulness and put the other points further into the green tree with Vigor or Arms Deal. These points plus all the ways we heal through sustainment mean you won't go down very often if you know how to dance around the battlefield. Note that Personal Space and Forceful Expression don't benefit our Nimbus Cloud damage. The Nimbus build, even back in Mayhem 4, has always struggled with enemies that are more tanky, isolated, and mobile. You can't and never could kill Graveward, for example. Don't even try. It won't take out Blue Fire and Red Rain at the end of Slaughterstar 3000. Wotan is a challenging fight, but doable. True takedown Wotan is very hard. But Guardian takedown bosses are totally doable because of our regular Ties That Bind and Remnant shenanigans. They're always spawning additional mobs. This updated build with all of our dots still falls slightly short of its former self when it comes to single targets. We need to use all 3 forms of attack on them. And for some bosses, we may have to change things up a little if we want a more efficient farming experience. Even after explaining how different this build is than it used to be, sometimes the fastest way to kill an enemy is to use a 300 phase slam ion cannon, put bonus radiation on, and proc a cloud on them with fracture. Fracture proccing phase slam anointments is also something we didn't have 7 months ago. But we can also use our regular URAD setup and switch to Fist Over Matter to take out a single target. Fist Over Matter will get our 150 bonus radiation damage. Which method works fastest depends on your target, so you'll have to experiment to find out. By the way, I'm calling this Thunderhead Amara to make it easily searchable and identifiable as the update to the Mayhem 4 Nimbus build. I'm not trying to take ownership of it. I consider this a descendant of Moxie's original build, and it wouldn't be near what it was without him. I chose the name Thunderhead because it's another name for a cumulonimbus cloud, and because we have the thundering cracks of the Nukem to accompany our Mayhem. By the way, check out Moxie's YouTube content, please, and feel free to stop by his Twitch streams. They're always a lot of fun. Back to our fight with Captain Tron. Can we kill him with what we've learned in this video? We sure can. A 300 phase slam ion cannon is slightly faster than a URAD Fist Over Matter setup, but they both do the job, and I think that's the best we can do.
Mission accomplished, more or less.